public broadcaster ARD has a major news show called Tagesschau. One common recurring segment of the show is a guest giving his commentary in a monologue. Last week, Georg Restle was one of these guests, and he spoke about right-wing extremism. I will go with you through his commentary to explain what he said, because it does have a cultural context and a language context. But I'm doing this for a specific purpose, and that is to make you aware of a larger issue, and in this case it is the integration of the media into the military-industrial complex. Mr. Restle is the editor-in-chief of the news show Monitor, a much smaller news show on also the public broadcaster ARD. He is not just a private individual who is giving an awkward opinion. You will see how his speech is concocted to have a specific effect, and the effect he tries to achieve is to stir up the public for conflict. This is what the military likes to do, and I assume that he was either talked to by an undercover agent or maybe even openly a person of the military to say what he has to say. The strategy here is to provoke the audience into violent action. They hope, of course, that the police will find that in time and will stop the aggressor, so that they can then use this as a cudgel against the conservatives. But he goes very far with his provocation, and you will see how this is done deliberately. He's ticking all the boxes that he can find. He actually wants somebody to show up with a weapon at his house. That's the ultimate goal. He had already received one letter with a death threat, and he published it. Or he did not publish the letter, but he published the fact that he received that letter. He went to the police with it, and so on. So this is the intent of his speech, and he is not the only one. I will not go through the second one, but I will mention it shortly. There was also this week a woman who spoke about how she does not want freedom, and that she thinks the state should force its citizens to a certain behavior because people actually want to be forced to do things. And her example was that she always has to decide whether to take a plane or the train. While ecologically, that would be very easy to decide. The train has no emissions or hardly any emissions, and therefore she should actually ride the train. Instead, she's checking the prices and finds out that a lot of inland flights are cheaper than taking the train. And she says the decision for her to make again and again is too strenuous. So the government should make the decision for her and make maybe the prices of the planes more expensive. So we are talking some communist price setting ideology here, and she's using this as an example to speak against freedom in itself, and she is mentioning that she does not want choices and freedom. So that really goes at the core of what people have died for. They have died for something, and it means something to people. And it is obvious that if you have seen so many others having died for something, that you are prepared to also give your life and even take a life to preserve your value, your freedom, and so on. And she is just making that very general about choices and freedom itself. While Mr. Restle, the commentary of whom I will go through with you in a second, is targeting the specific institutions of our democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on. And he's also speaking about how all his enemies or all his opponents, political opponents, are enemies that must be utterly ostracized and destroyed. So here is what he has to say.
Rechtsextremistisch sind die sogenannten Identitären jetzt also ganz hochoffiziell. Und ja, da hätte man auch schon früher drauf kommen können, wenn man denn genau hingeschaut, wenn man es denn wirklich gewollt hätte. Man mag vom Verfassungsschutz halten, was man will, aber wer A sagt, muss jetzt auch B sagen. Wer die identitäre Bewegung für rechtsextremistisch hält, kann die AfD nicht länger außen vor halten.
Here he tries to vilify the entire opposition. He starts with a generation identity, the most prominent leader of which is Martin Sellner, now married to Brittany Pettibone.
As you might have heard, Brittany now is also a suspect in the big terror case around the donation of Planned Parenthood.
Well, apparently I always was under investigation.
And he says that when these people are now officially by our Secret Service agency Verfassungsschutz as categorized as right-wing extremist, then of course also the AfD and all their voters and so on, so a large portion of the public must be criminalized as Nazis.
Zu nah stehen sich beide, persönlich, strukturell und ideologisch sowieso. Seien es der völkische Nationalismus, die rassistischen Denkmuster oder der Kampf gegen die Institutionen der Demokratie.
Needless to say that, of course, the institutions of democracy are gay marriage, abortion, whatever the left likes. It is not freedom of speech, separation of power, separation of church and state, and so on and so on. So democracy is, like Louis XIV in France once famously said, l'état c'est moi, the state, that's me. On the political left is defined as the democracy, that's just me. That's what I do. And if you listen to German politicians, you have that very often, that they actually speak about their everyday life, what their parliament does, and so on, to explain what democracy is. And even when they talk about other countries, the supposed weakness of the other countries is always that they do not something exactly like the German politicians do.
Was bei den identitären Ideologie ist, ist bei der AfD quasi Programm. Man kennt sich, man trifft sich und ja, man marschiert sogar Seite an Seite, wie man in Chemnitz letztes Jahr beobachten konnte.
And of course, one of these institutions that they do not respect is freedom of association, which is written down, for example, in the Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations. But outside of that, it is very crucial for any free society to function. You must be able to walk with whoever you want to walk, to talk to whoever you want to talk to. And it's impossible for anybody to go through the biography and every former statement of a person, take into account what opinions could have changed in the meantime and what have stayed the same. For every step in your life, you have to mingle with people that you do not like, and the left tries to weaponize that against you. Also, there is a current article on Zeit Online where they speak about some members of the Generation Identity taking part in a protest march of a fringe party called Die Rechte, which I have no idea about. I don't care. Don't try to justify them or to research them even. I don't care. So they are a small group who have registered a protest here and there, and Generation Identity members took part in these protest marches. If you take part in the protest marches, what you have to know is the manifesto, and you have to roughly agree with what the speakers say. If what the speaker says is against your convictions and you have some leeway to leave the assembly, then you should actually leave the assembly. All you are responsible for when you join a protest is the message you want to get onto the streets. And if that message is delivered, you are free to join in. You do not have to go into excessive research about every single person left and right of you.
Wer den Rechtsextremismus in Deutschland verstehen will, muss begreifen, dass wir es mit einem weitreichenden und professionell organisierten Netzwerk zu tun haben, mit rechten Kampfsportevents und Rechtsrockkonzerten, mit völkischen Jugendlagern und Studienzentren und engsten Verbindungen zum Rechtsterrorismus.
So here you have the entire scaremongering, starting with martial arts and continuing up to terror groups.
In diesem Netzwerk sind die Identitären eng verwoben und für dieses Netzwerk erfüllt die AfD eine zentrale Funktion. Als parlamentarischer Arm einer rechtsextremistischen Bewegung, die ihre Stärke und ihre Hoffnung auf den Umsturz aus den Wahlerfolgen der AfD bezieht.
And here he goes to the extreme to claim that the entire Conservative Party or movement internationally are just extremists, are just terrorists, violent people who have a parliamentarian arm. And this is military language. You have to know that we are talking about the parliamentarian arm of a terror group when we speak about the Middle East, when we speak about Hamas and Hezbollah. When the government, our government, is asked about Hezbollah, they usually say, "Oh, that's just their peaceful, legitimate civil arm and you may not criticize them for, showing the Hitler salute all the time, but only the military arm is a problem. However, here, when it comes to conservatives, it goes the other way around. We are supposed to believe that all conservatives are potential terrorists, and the people in the parliaments are basically the face, the facade of all these gun-wielding nutcases that are short of killing everybody around them and making a putsch, a coup d'etat. And this is actually what they really fear. Well, they fear losing power, and they have to make this fear-mongering about potential violence because they cling so much to their seat and to their financial support.
Wer dieses Nazi-Netzwerk also schwächen will, darf der AfD keinen Raum, keine Bühne und erst recht keine Stimme geben. Das wäre ein klares Zeichen gegen Rechtsextremismus und deutlich wirkungsvoller, als darauf zu warten, bis der Verfassungsschutz auch die AfD als rechtsextremistisch einstuft.
And here's using a concept that is usually introduced as civil society. That sounds good, but we have now the situation that people, ordinary citizens, are asked to denounce their fellow man. That was also the case under the Nazis. It was the case under the communist regime. Most famously, there were those unofficial members, IM, who spied their neighbors and the family members and so on. And we are getting this back. The difference, really, according to Vera Lengsfeld, a former civil rights activist in East Germany who helped bring down the wall, is that today the authorities have a very easy time to find many volunteers. In East Germany, people were aware that their government is crap. They were smart. They were showing solidarity with each other, and the Stasi only managed to get 1% of the people behind them. Today, 1%, don't get me wrong, 1% is already enough to actually control the population. Imagine how many people you meet every day in your life, in your bus, in your school, in your university, in your workplace, wherever you go, in your whatever hobby you follow, sports club. 100 people aren't many, and statistically one of them will spy on you. And you cannot hide your views all day long. It is impossible to hide your views, even if those leftists claim that freedom of speech does not really matter, and you can also talk about the weather instead. The reality is that sooner or later your thoughts, your views will come through, and they will detect you. And the sooner you get honest about it, the better it is. But the difference between the openly communist regime in East Germany and modern day Germany is that the Stasi had a hard time to actually get people on board and keep them on board, spying their own neighbors, friends, and so forth. Of course, he's also attacking all the basic institutions, no right to assemble, no right to speak. Basically, he wants to exclude conservatives from political participation altogether. We are talking the abolition of democracy. He lays it out in detail. And of course, he does expect that people get violent over it, because many people have lost their lives for this democracy. The group that is actually destroying every single institution of democracy is almost exclusively the political left. And I count Muslims as the political left, because they are a solid voting bloc of left-wing parties, because they share more ideas with the political left than with the political right. That was it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.